When I bought my property, the real estate agent barely mentioned the creek. It's seasonal, she said casually, waving toward a narrow channel cutting through the back third of the land. Mostly dries up by late summer. That was technically true, but misleading. The creek didn't roar. It didn't flood. It didn't sparkle like something out of a postcard. It just existed. Quiet. Persistent. Patient. It had carved its path through the land long before the HOA showed up with their manicured lawns, vinyl fences, and color-approved mailboxes. I later learned it was classified as an intermittent tributary, feeding into a larger watershed about half a mile downstream. What that meant legally was important. But at the time, I just liked the sound of water at night. 6 months after I moved in, construction began uphill for my property. Heavy machinery, dump trucks, survey stakes, orange fencing. A brand new HOA subdivision was being carved into what used to be open meadow. From day one, they hated my land.
Why?
Because my property wasn't uniform. I didn't mow everything. I left native grasses. I didn't install a privacy fence. I didn't care if my shed didn't match their aesthetic. And worst of all, I had a creek. Creeks don't obey HOA landscaping plans. The first letter arrived in a cream-colored envelope with an embossed logo. It accused my property of contributing excess water flow onto HOA land. I laughed. The creek flowed away from them. Uphill water came from their development toward me. I called the number. A woman answered. Sharp voice. Practiced irritation. "This is Karen," she said. "President of the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association." Of course it was. I explained calmly that the creek predated the subdivision, that I hadn't altered anything. Her response? Well, it's unsightly. And it's causing mud.
Mud.
From a creek that had been there longer than her neighborhood. A month later, I noticed something strange. The creek wasn't flowing like it used to. The water pooled, then slowed, then spread sideways into my lower field. I followed it uphill. That's when I saw it. Concrete.
Fresh. Gray.
Poured directly across the creek channel, forming a crude dam buried under soil and sod. They hadn't rerouted it. They hadn't installed culverts. They had blocked it. Just filled it in. Water is patient, but it is relentless. Within 2 weeks, my field stayed wet longer than usual. Within a month, cattails started appearing. Frogs moved in. Mosquitoes threw a party. Meanwhile, uphill, the HOA celebrated. No more ugly creek. Their retention pond looked calm. Their lawns looked perfect. Until the rain came. It rained for 3 days straight. Not a flood. Not a disaster. Just steady, soaking rain. On the second night, I heard shouting. On the third morning, I woke up to sirens. I walked uphill. The HOA's blocked creek had backed up. Water surged sideways, into basements, crawl spaces, and streets. The retention pond overflowed. Storm drains reversed. Their neighborhood turned into a shallow lake. And guess what? Water doesn't care about property lines. Karen showed up at my gate with 2 board members and a clipboard. "You did this," she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. "You blocked a creek." I replied calmly. "What did you expect?" She pointed at my soggy field. "That swamp is proof your land is unstable." I smiled. "No," I said. "It's proof water is being illegally obstructed." Her face went pale. I used one sentence. "I believe a protected tributary has been illegally filled with concrete." There was a pause. Then, "Can you email photos?" They came a week later. 3 trucks. State badges.
Clipboards. Soil probes.
GPS equipment. They didn't ask the HOA for permission. They didn't ask Karen for approval. They walked straight to the blocked creek. One inspector knelt, brushed soil away, and exposed the concrete.
He sighed.
That wasn't a sigh of confusion. It was the sigh of someone who had seen this mistake before. I still remember the exact sentence. "This tributary feeds a navigable watershed. Filling it without permits is a serious violation." Karen laughed nervously. "Oh, it's just a drainage ditch." The inspector looked at her like she'd just confessed to arson. Ma'am, he said, this creek is older than your subdivision. Silence. Absolute silence. Another inspector flipped through his tablet. Given the sustained saturation, hydric soils, and emergent vegetation, he said, this area now qualifies as a jurisdictional wetland. Karen blinked. A what? A wetland, he repeated. I almost felt bad. Almost. Wetland designation meant no construction, no drainage, changes, mandatory restoration, ongoing monitoring, heavy fines by blocking the creek. They had transformed half their development into a protected wetland buffer. Their own lawns, their own basements, their own streets. 2 weeks later, certified letters went out. Not to me. To the HOA. Violations included unauthorized fill of waters of the state, alteration of natural drainage, failure to obtain permits, environmental damage, total potential fines? 6 figures. And restoration? On their dime, Duddy called me. Her tone was different now. Almost polite. Maybe we can work something out, she said. I looked out over the newly forming wetland. Dragonflies hovering where sod used to be. I tried to warn you, I said. You poured concrete instead. She hung up, because once the state got involved, the federal inspectors weren't far behind. And they don't care about HOA bylaws. They care about water. Federal involvement and massive fines, HOA lawsuits, insurance refusal, and board collapse, final outcome, and how the neighborhood was permanently changed. State inspectors are serious. Federal inspectors are terrifying. 2 black and white trucks rolled in early on a Tuesday morning.
No HOA announcement.
No community email blast. No chance for damage control. They parked right at the entrance of Willow Ridge. Logos on the doors read. That's when homeowners realized this wasn't a drainage dispute. This was a federal problem. I didn't see it directly, but one of my neighbors later showed me screenshots. Messages flooded in. Why are there federal trucks here? Is this about flooding? Who approved that concrete? Karen said it was fine? Karen didn't reply. She was too busy trying to explain herself to a man wearing a badge who didn't care about HOA titles. The Corps inspector walked the creek path with laser precision. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't debating. He was measuring jurisdiction. Intermittent tributary, he said. Connected to navigable waters. Subject to Clean Water Act protections. Karen tried again. But it's dry sometimes. He didn't even look up. So are rivers and droughts, he replied. That doesn't make them ditches. Another inspector pointed to the concrete fill. Unauthorized discharge of fill material into waters of the United States. That phrase alone carries per day. Karen's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The EPA agent stepped into what used to be the HOA's greenbelt. Water squelched under his boots. He knelt, scooped soil, rubbed it between his fingers.
Gray. Sticky.
Anaerobic. Hydric soil.
He stood and nodded.
This wetland has expanded due to obstruction of natural flow, he said. Translation? The HOA didn't just damage a wetland. They created one. And now they were responsible for it forever. One resident finally spoke up. Can we just remove the concrete? The inspector shook his head. Not without permits. Another resident asked, can we drain it? Again, no. A third asked the worst question of all. Does this lower our property values? No one answered. They didn't need to. Within days, insurance adjusters arrived. And left. Flooding caused by intentional environmental violations is excluded. The HOA's master policy? Denied. Individual homeowners? Also denied, because the flooding originated from common area negligence. Suddenly, everyone understood what Karen had done. They called an emergency meeting in the community clubhouse. Standing room only. Karen took the podium. She started with, we acted in the community's best interest. She never finished. A homeowner stood up. Did you pour concrete into a creek without permits? Karen hesitated. That was her mistake. Because hesitation is confession. Within 10 minutes, treasurer resigned, vice president quit, board member walked out. Karen tried to adjourn. The crowd wouldn't let her. Someone shouted, you've destroyed our homes. Another yelled, you made us a wetland. Someone else said quietly but loud enough, This is criminal. The first lawsuit came fast. Then the second. Then a class action. Claims included property damage, loss of home value, negligence, breach of fiduciary duty. Karen's personal assets were now at risk. HOA insurance refused to defend her.
Why?
Because environmental violations void coverage. The court issued a restoration order. Requirements: remove all concrete, excavate, filled channel, reconstruct natural creek bed, replant native vegetation, monitor for 10 years. Estimated cost? Paid by the HOA, which meant special assessments. Every homeowner received it. A certified envelope. Inside, people stared at the number like it was fake. It wasn't. And it was only the beginning. For sale signs appeared overnight. But disclosure laws are unforgiving. Every listing had to include property affected by protected wetland designation. Buyers vanished. Banks hesitated. Refinancing froze. The HOA had successfully turned a premium subdivision into a financial trap. She showed up one last time. This time without confidence. Without backup. You should have stopped us, she said. I looked at her. You never asked, I replied. And I'm not responsible for your illegal decisions. She started crying. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet panic. Total, $500,000. Payable regardless of restoration costs. The HOA was bankrupt. The board voted to dissolve. Court-appointed management took over. Karen resigned in writing. She moved out quietly a month later. Her house sold at a loss. A big one. The irony? My property improved. The restored creek flowed better than ever. The wetland stabilized. Wildlife returned. And because the violation wasn't mine, I faced zero liability. The inspectors even thanked me for reporting it. Water always wins. Law always finds shortcuts. And concrete poured in arrogance costs more than patience ever would. Once the federal fines became public record, attorneys swarmed Willow Ridge like vultures. Environmental law firms, property damage specialists, class action attorneys. They didn't even need to advertise. Homeowners were calling them. And the first thing every lawyer asked was the same question. Who approved the concrete? It was what she documented. HOA boards love paperwork, emails, minutes, approvals. And Karen had proudly put everything in writing. Meeting notes included phrases like, creek filled to improve appearance, permits unnecessary due to HOA authority. Homeowner objections dismissed. Those documents became exhibits. Very expensive exhibits. But there was one damning email. Karen had written, if we wait for permits, we'll never get this done. Just pour it. That sentence alone destroyed her defense. The EPA considered criminal charges. They really did. Intentional violation. Willful negligence. Environmental harm. In the end, they chose civil penalties instead. Not mercy. Strategy. Civil cases are easier to win, and bankrupt people just as effectively. Karen avoided jail. She didn't avoid ruin. The neighborhood fractured. Some blamed Karen. Others blamed the board. A few tried blaming me, until lawyers shut that down fast. People stopped waving. Stopped talking. Longtime neighbors became enemies over assessment payments. One family paid their $47,000 and moved out within weeks. Another couldn't and lost their home. Special assessments don't care about feelings. Miss payments long enough and liens attach. Then foreclosures. Within 6 months, homes in default foreclosures filed short sales, all because someone didn't like how a creek looked, who hadn't already fled. Claims expanded to include emotional distress, loss of equity, fraud, gross negligence. Karen's personal lawyer quit. Conflict of interest. The HOA couldn't afford a new one. The judge didn't care about HOA politics. He cared about facts. And facts were merciless. This creek existed prior to development, he said. You altered it without authority. You caused predictable harm. Karen tried to speak. The judge stopped her. Liability was clear. Damages were next. And damages were massive. She sold her house, her car, her investments, her retirement fund. Judgments followed her like shadows. Wages garnished. Accounts frozen. HOA presidents don't get immunity. They get responsibility. The court dissolved Willow Ridge HOA. Common areas were placed under receivership. Here's the part no one expected. Even after restoration, the wetlands stayed.
Why?
Because legally, once established and stabilized, it gains protection. The inspectors classified it as a restored and expanded jurisdictional wetland of ecological significance. Translation? It's there forever. No new construction.
No expansions.
No drainage changes.
No basement renovations.
No road widening. The neighborhood was frozen in time. Banks labeled it high risk. Buyers walked away. Property values never recovered. I became known as the guy with the creek. Not angrily, respectfully. People stopped blaming me. They started asking questions. How did you know? I told them the truth. I respected the land. 2 years later, inspectors returned. They smiled. The creek flowed naturally. The wetland supported birds, frogs, insects. Native plants thrived. They closed the file. Compliance achieved. I got a letter. No return address. Just an apology.
No excuses.
Just regret. I didn't reply. Some lessons don't need responses. You can fight neighbors. You can bully homeowners. You can ignore warnings. But you never fight water. And you never fight environmental law.